Heidi-ho, neighborinos, it's Bill Whittle, and it's the Stratosphere Lounge, and you can tell it's a Stratosphere Lounge because of the cave-like echo here in the Stratosphere Lounge. How's everybody doing? It's great to be here, great to be back. Sorry about the Thursday, last-minute push to Thursday. We always like to open on the wide shot so I can show off this giant banner, and then everybody says they like to go to the close-up on account of how it feels like the old Stratosphere Lounge back in the days when we just did it out of a webcam. And, yeah, there's a couple things to talk about as usual. We got the same format as usual. We got a little theme show tonight. We took the top 10 questions, and we only took the top 10 because, frankly, if we'd taken more than the top 10, I probably would have gone ballistic. The topic for tonight is, what would I do if I had all the time and money in the world to fix things? And I started thinking about megalomaniacal thoughts and things of that nature, and it's probably not good for me. So we're going to do the top 10. But just as always, to get you caught up to speed a little bit about what happened in the last week, I was up in Mountain View doing a speaking engagement up there, which is close enough to Berkeley so that my skin would have caught fire. And C-SPAN was there. So that's the first time I've ever done a show with C-SPAN in the house. That was kind of cool, I have to say. And then let's see what else. Oh, by the way, Moffett Air Force Base is up there, and I didn't know this. I knew there was NASA had an Ames Research Center. I didn't know it was at Moffett Field in just outside of San Jose. So I went around there, saw a couple of static displays. They got a couple airplanes on the ground there. A couple things about those airplanes that just blew my mind. There was an F-104 Starfighter there, which they called the missile with a man in it. It's got the smallest wing of any airplane I think that ever flew. And I'd never been up close enough to it to see how small the wing is, but the wing on that fighter airplane, which weighs a fair amount of weight, is smaller than the wing on my Sky Arrow, far smaller. They say the leading edge was so sharp that you could cut paper with it. There was a protector on that, so that was cool. And there was a U-2 there, U-2 spy plane, and that was a lot smaller than I thought, about half the size. So they had the giant hangar there, the hangar that they built for the Akron and the Makron, I guess, just gigantic, stripped down to the girders, so that was pretty neat. And other than that, I would say that it was pretty cool as a general experience, and let's do that. Wait, I would like that a little better. Yeah, so that was fun. Let's see what else. How could I not lead with this, Astro Girl? I cannot believe I didn't lead with this. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may or may not know, we have done 5 time over targets in a row, every day available to members. Been talking about doing this for about a year. And, well, certainly not the time over targets for a year, but we've been doing members-only content every day for a week, and we're shooting a bunch more over the weekend. We were actually able to hire a second individual. We are now a 3-person operation with a 4th person doing the booking. So that'll get some of the weight off of my shoulders in terms of the post-production load, and that's good. So nothing but good news there. And one thing we're all excited about is Speakeasy, which we've got coming up on Monday. And I suppose, we have the Stratosphere Lounge. This is a place where we let the insiders of the insiders, the super VIP exclusive club, know the inside details. So we actually can tell you, before we tell anybody else, the actual cast of the first Speakeasy show, which we'll shoot on Monday, January 19th, at the El Portal Theater in North Hollywood. And at 7:30 p.m. We sold it out in 2 days, I think, once we made an announcement to our members, and members get in free, so we sold that baby out like that. 100-seat theater. And that in itself was pretty cool, just selling the show out that fast. I think we can probably go to the 360-seat theater if we get enough notice out there. In any event, on January 19th, coming up, we will have the very first of the Speakeasy shows featuring myself, our mutual friend Jeremy Boring, director of The Arroyo, and fine fellow filmmaker in Hollywood, needless to say, one of my very all-time best friends, partner at Declaration Entertainment. And we got Jeremy there because he's a real smart guy, but especially because he's a real funny guy, and I'll come back to that in a minute. We have, as our other guests, we have somebody who we did a really kind of a last-minute decision, but I think it's really going to pay off. We've got somebody named Bonnie Gordon. I'm sure most of you have not heard of Bonnie Gordon, but Bonnie Gordon, I think, is probably about 22 years old, something like that. We did a series of interviews at PJTV last week on gaming and the culture. And Bonnie's a gamer, and she's been on a show called The Quest on ABC, and she's part of an improv comedy group. And the reason I decided to pick her on this first one was because it's a really different viewpoint. I would say something on the show, interview show that we did for PJTV, and I would say something, and then Clavin would agree with me, and she just plain disagreed with both of us. So imagine my surprise when she wouldn't respect her elders, which I admire enormously in a young person. The reason I'm so interested in Bonnie, and I'm so happy to have her on the first show, is because Bonnie is the kind of person who it just brings a whole nother perspective to the thing. And I don't want this to be a show about. I don't want this to be, what's your position on ISIS, Bill, or what are we going to do about the Palestinian issue? I'm much, much, much more interested in the dynamics. And when I was sending an email to the next guest that I'll mention, I figured out what it was about the Speakeasy show that I liked, and I found it in a sentence. I didn't even realize it till I wrote the sentence out. But I said, I'm not so much concerned with what we say. I'm very, very concerned about how we say it. And that's what Speakeasy is going to basically be about. I think our primary goal is to show people that we're fun people. We have a blast, and we generally can talk about this stuff and be hilarious. So we have Bonnie, Jeremy. We have international film and television star Nick Searcy, who some of you are familiar with from Justified, and who played Tom Hanks' best friend in Castaway. Nick is a really great guy, old Hollywood guy, very funny guy. He's got Nick Searcy's acting school on YouTube, which is hilarious. And Nick is a fun guy to play with. I first met Nick on Politics and Poker back in the Right Network days, back, I don't know, 4 years ago when they're trying to get that launched. And Justified has its season opening the night after, so Nick's going to be there. And our final guest, in order to mix it up a little bit, our final guest is somebody I thought I'd go with because I think it plays really well opposite Bonnie. And that is, this name will ring a bell for many of you out there. Our final guest is going to be Orson Bean, ladies and gentlemen. Orson Bean. I don't know how many of you know Orson Bean. I saw Orson when he was an actor. Actually, I first saw Orson Bean when I was a kid growing up. Orson was on every single panel show ever made. He was on To Tell the Truth. He was on What's My Line. He was on, all of this stuff. He's a professional wit. Orson's got an incredible story. Orson was on one of the original Twilight Zone episodes, and man, he is a clever, smart guy. So we're going to have somebody in their 80s, somebody in their 20s, and me, of course, in my late 20s, and totally balanced a little bit to the younger. Nick Searcy, of course, and is probably in his early 80s, maybe late 70s, something like that. And Jeremy. So it'll be Bill Whittle, Jeremy Boring, Bonnie Gordon, Orson Bean, and Nick Searcy in the El Portal Theater on Monday night. And we will get at least 8, if not 12, Speakeasy segments out of that. We're going to put it together into a half-hour TV show format. We'll cut it down into a 22:30 thing and see if we can get it syndicated. I think we have a good chance. I think we have a very good chance of getting this syndicated. I think there's a lot of room out there in the real world marketplace for actual TV shows, not only for right or center right or libertarian kind of commentary, but also for something that just snaps. And that's my entire goal, is I just want this thing to pop and hum and sparkle and crackle. So that's something we're real excited about. By the time we shoot the next Stratosphere Lounge, we'll have it in the bank, and we're really looking forward to it. So this stuff, slowly but surely, it's happening in build time, but it is happening. The studio is finished. Time Over Target's up there, 1 a day. We're shooting Speakeasy on Monday, and onward. So great news. All right, so why don't we get to our questions, because we're going to keep it relatively brief tonight, only because I still have to finish up that firewall. We've got a little extra work to do. We've been doing it. And I think I'll have this whole weekend to work on things, so we'll get these things set up and then we'll knock them down. So ready, here we go. Dave Olson had the highest ranked question, and it's a doozy. And he basically said, how would you go about hardening our power grid and associated infrastructure against EMP, which is electromagnetic pulse? So this is the how would you solve our problems, Bill, if you had unlimited time and money issue. I think, Dave, what I'd start off by doing is I would change the overall design idea of a grid completely going forward. I certainly wouldn't sink large amounts of money into this going backwards. I'll get to the hardening thing in a minute. But I would say going forward, we need to stop thinking about big power grids. I think we need to think really small. I did an afterburner about that called Think Small. I would definitely concentrate more on much smaller, much more local systems, because I'd have everything as self-contained as I could. I'd personally love to have my own thorium reactor in the backyard. I think thorium reactor in the backyard would be just grand. Having my own power would make me very, 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 very happy. So that's the first thing I would do, is I would basically try to get the power systems as decentralized as we possibly can. Keep them small and keep them local, and use gas, use whatever we had available. And that's just my sort of starting position, is this, try to get away from this idea of these enormous power utilities with single points of failure and all this other stuff. But look, the way you go around hardening the power grid and infrastructure against EMP is the way you go around hardening it against anything. You have to spend a great deal of money on that. One of the things I would do, Dave, and I only found out about this recently from Frank Gaffney, who's done a tremendous amount of work on the grid and EMP. One of the little things I found out is that, you don't have to have a terrorist attack on a nuclear power station, that these switching stations, transformers, relay stations, are very vulnerable. There was a terrorist attack in Northern California where men with rifles shot up a transformer station, took out all of the cooling mechanisms, cut something like 6 out of the 7 communication systems, thought they cut them all, left one open, and they were able to power down these things. But one of the many things that I learned to my horror about the system is that these giant transformer power stations are, in fact, unique. In other words, it's not like it's a module. It's not like even a locomotive, right? They're making thousands of these diesel-electric locomotives. If you have a locomotive runs off a bridge or a locomotive fails, you put another locomotive on there, and the track widths are the same, and it runs on the same fuel, and it's more or less the same size, and the hitch is the same size. These transformers are about the size and weight of locomotives, some of these switching stations, and they're all unique. They're individually built for that power station, and we don't have big old stocks of them on the shelves. So one of the first things I would do would be to standardize the grid. I'd make sure that it was standardized, and I'd have some parts in reserve. Because as it turns out, if some of this stuff gets cooked, you're out of town for a long, long time. And then, frankly, the hardening process is like any other kind of systematic repair where you are trying to change an incredibly complex system. If you think about the electrical grid in the United States of America, you are maybe talking about the most complex structure on Earth when you get right down to the individual sockets in everybody's houses. It is, in fact, the nervous system of the country. It's the nervous system. And if you looked at the United States as a body, as a physical body, this would be the nervous system down to the individual neurons. So if you had to replace every neuron in the body, I think what you would do is you would start with the most critical stuff. So first thing you do is you harden by applying insulation, or going from whatever kind of control mechanisms go from electronic to optical, because you can't EMP out an optical switching system. So I'd get the control and data systems switched before I get the power system switched, so that we could stay with fiber optics, which obviously are faster. They use less energy. They're immune to EMP. So I'd start switching the communication systems to fiber as fast as I possibly could. That's going to be great because, number one, it means it's not a subject to EMP. It's not subject to solar flares. I'd go to fiber optics for all the communication systems first. Second thing I would do is I would start working on hardening up the actual power, which does have to be delivered by copper wires, which is susceptible to EMP. But as I was standardizing the transformers and making everything smaller, I would be concentrating on the power conduits to the places that needed it first. So it's really just kind of common sense, isn't it? In other words, I'd harden the power plant, and then I would harden the main lines out of the power plant to the hospital, the police station, and the fire station. Those would be the first things that I would protect against EMP attack or solar flare attack or something like that. And then slowly I'd work my way out to various other buildings and make sure that everything new coming online, every new structure had to have hardened electrical systems so that you're not having to replace stuff in the future. Yeah, this would add cost. There's no question it would add cost, and people would kick about the cost a little bit. But it is the kind of thing that we have to understand. One of the things that's so annoying to me is this idea that every time I take off my shoes and belt, although I have to say I don't have to do that anymore since I'm TSA pre-approved, not to brag or anything, but for a guy who travels all the time, that is worth the investment. Is this idea that this next attack is going to come the way the last attack came, and it's not. It's going to be different. It's going to be a cyber attack or an EMP attack or something like that. So communication systems first, critical power mains second, everything new comes in hardened third, standardization of the parts so that you can literally have shelves full of these giant transformers, and if one of them gets taken out by a terrorist attack or whatever, you just pull one off the shelf and get it there and so on. And generally speaking, make everything smaller. Make electricity as homegrown as possible. I think, we often get mocked for mocking the greens, and I mock the greens all the time because I don't think the greens are about being green. I think they're about being red. But with that said, you're kind of nuts not to take advantage of the free energy from the sun, even if it's just things like preheating your hot water. These things only make sense if they make financial sense, if they make economic sense. So I would basically say, if you can afford a solar water heater, great. It'll save you money over the long run. And if you can afford solar cells to take some of the load off of your electrical system, great. Do all of that. But ultimately, for me, the world that I'd really like to see, I know we'll never get there. I'm not that naive. But what would be an ideal world would be a world where every house generated its own power. And if that's not feasible, and it's not, then a world where neighborhoods generated what power the houses couldn't generate. Make it small, make it local. And then the final thing I would do, if you want to talk about a practical solution, is one of the things that Frank Gaffney talks about with this issue is there's kind of this back and forth of guilt and blame between the government and the utilities. And it works basically like this. People start howling about, we need to harden these systems so that in case of a solar flare or a EMP attack, we don't lose the power. It's going to cost a lot of money. So the government says that's the job of the power utilities. The power utilities say, no, that's the job of the government. The government says, well, we can't do it without raising taxes. The power company says, well, we can't do it without raising rates. And so it doesn't get done. And I think maybe the way to do it would be to shame the smallest of these companies into saying, look, there's that line from Heaven Can Wait where Warren Beatty inhabits the body of a businessman, and it's something about tuna, and it's something about how there are people protesting tuna fishing, and Warren says, well, ask people if they'd pay another nickel to save a fish that thinks, and I think most people would. Just take the case to them, and I think if you take the case to them, then they'll probably get on board with you. But it's important, and I think if we had an actual leader who said, folks, here's the problem. The reason nobody takes it seriously is because it hasn't happened yet. And nobody took the foam coming off of the shuttle seriously until it ruined the Columbia's day, and no one took the burn-throughs on the SRBs until Challenger seriously until it burned through on the Challenger, and so on. So let's just understand that while this hasn't happened yet, if it does happen, it's the end of civilization as we know it. If the power grid of the country goes out and is not back for 6 months or a year, refrigeration goes, water purification goes, water pumping goes, food distribution goes, it's not pretty. So make the case, Mr. President, and then say how we, all of us together as Americans, are going to share the burden. That's how I do it. Yeah, and as a Deidre Malcolm says, a liquid fluoride thorium reactor on every block. That's my motto. God, I couldn't agree more. Put it on a bumper sticker and I will have it. Fluoride thorium reactor on every block. That's the answer. Moving on, Joshua Tiemans asks, how would you fix the government disobeying the Constitution? I'd get a new government. Pretty much is what I would do. Josh, I'd get a new government. I'd get a government that obeyed the law. And I'm going to make short work out of this one because there is no more complex answer to it. And in order for me to explain how you would get rid of the government, I'd have to get into a lot of things that I spent a lot of time talking about, and I don't have time to talk about tonight. But the short form is you need somebody who understands messaging to the point where they can make the case to the American people in terms that they understand, in simple terms, plain terms, story terms, emotional terms. Make the case that the government obeying the law is important. And until somebody does that, we're going to get worse and worse and worse. So make the case that the government obeying the law is important to the American people through messaging. That has to happen first. And then when people in the government don't obey the law, call them out and get a new government. Of all the questions here, Joshua, that's the hardest one to fix, obviously, because you've got to swim upstream against the media and entertainment and all that stuff. And I understand all that. I just don't know what else to say about it. You could put a few of them in jail, or threaten to. I don't believe in witch hunts, and I don't believe in the idea of tracking down our political enemies and getting even with them. But I wouldn't mind bringing charges against everybody who could be shown to have intentionally violated the Constitution. Bring charges against them. Take them to court, win, and then sentence them to, time served in Congress. But make the case that they broke the law, and we are not punishing them only because we don't want to go after them. We don't want to be a banana republic, seeking revenge. But yeah, and frankly, the way you get people who understand the Constitution, the way you fix the government disobeying the Constitution, is you get representatives who obey the Constitution. And I've said this since, I don't know, my God, since I started writing. That means for me, let's get large numbers of veterans into the government. Let's just get as many veterans into the government as we can, because they understand this better than any other single group of people in the country that I can be aware of. Okay, Henry Tate Holcomb asks, how would you fix the U.S. Air Force with all the issues after the F-35? Well, first of all, I'd scrap the F-35. I put the money into some F-22s. I put the rest of the money into upgrading A-10s and new avionics on F-16s and F-15s. These are super airplanes. I put a lot of money into unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned aerial combat vehicles. But the way you fix the Air Force is pretty simple. You can fix the Air Force at the same time as you fix the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and Marines. Is the single thing you could do to fix this, and fix it quickly, is pretty simple, and that's get rid of cost-plus contracts. Right? The reason the F-35 is such a boondoggle, the reason it costs so much money and doesn't work, is because it's based on a cost-plus system. I think that's where the future is. The cost-plus system is set up in such a way that, it's cost-plus, right? So what happens in a cost-plus system? The more time they spend running up the cost, the more money they make. They have no incentive to come in on time. They have no incentive to provide a superior product. The incentive for cost plus, basically cost plus, if you don't know, is where the government says, tell us what it's going to cost to build 500 F-35s, and we'll pay you that plus a percentage of profit, a set percentage of profit. So now let's imagine you're Lockheed. What's Lockheed's position? All right. The more of these planes that we build, the longer it takes us to build these planes, the more we get paid. The higher the cost gets, the more we get paid, because we get paid cost. If you're Lockheed, what you really come down to is you suddenly realize, the perfect world for us would be to never deliver the airplanes, because if we never deliver a single airplane, if they would stand for it, if I'm Lockheed, my position would be, if we can figure out a way to never deliver an airplane, but just keep billing them for cost, then we're all employed forever and happy days. Why would we want to get off of this cash cow? The answer is to get rid of cost plus and go back to what worked so well when we were really breaking records every day out in the Mojave, which is competitive, flat rate competitive contracts for what we wanted with fly-offs. And we'd basically say, hey, you know what, kids? We got $700 billion, and we need 600 airframes, and they need to do this, and this. Anybody want the $600 billion? Turns out a lot of companies would. Great. build us some prototypes and fly them off. That's what they did with the F-22 and the F-23, and they've done the F-16 and the F-18, and so on and so on and so on. And then what happens is the dynamic completely inverts itself. Now the companies are incentivized to do two things. They're incentivized to put in a lower bid, a less expensive bid, and they're incentivized to produce as much performance as they can, because if they don't, not only do they not get the contract, but they're out the money it took for them to build the prototype. And if you don't think you can build a prototype that can win, you're probably in the wrong business. And it's really, really simple. It's really simple. Just do that, and these problems go away. Get rid of cost plus contracts, and it goes away in NASA. It goes away in the military. All this stuff is done this way. So ask yourself where the incentive is. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show before, but my apartment overlooks the 405 freeway, which is the busiest stretch of road in the world in terms of miles, cars traveled per hour. The 405 takes the cake. And they've been renovating the 405 since 2008 with stimulus money, and it's still not finished. And why would it be? You'll drive down the 405 and you'll see two people working on a stretch that's 15 miles long or 6 miles long. And because they're working, they've choked off a lane or two, and everybody's backed up, and everybody's losing an hour. You got millions of people losing hours of work every day. That's significant loss in productivity, but they don't care. Why would they care? They've got a sum of money, and the longer they keep people on the job, the longer these union guys are working. So needless to say, they're not in any hurry to finish the 405. Needless to say, while it was supposed to have been done in 2011, let's stretch it out to 15, 16, 17, 18. Why not? We keep employing our people. The money keeps coming. Of course, that's their incentive. People, we just need to understand how incentive works. We're not idiots. We know how it works. That's why the government and the unions are in these iron kind of triangle deals. Here's the deal. We'll charge the taxpayers some outrageous amount of money. You put 3 guys on the job. We'll pay them forever. Sweet. Now, here's why I bring this subject up. There was one exception in the contract to this, and that exception was this. At 2 times during the renovation of the 405 freeway, at 2 different intervals during that time, it was going to be required to basically bring down a bridge over the top of Sepulveda Pass, and there was no way to bring that bridge down by blocking off a lane or 2 or 3, because inconveniencing people, they're happy to do for 20 years. But stopping traffic on the most traveled road in the world is not something that they would do, because people would rise up with pitchforks if they shut the 405 down for weeks. And so what's so interesting to me about the 405 construction project is this. It's gone on and 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 on, except for the 2 times they had to bring that bridge down. They did it a couple years apart. They brought the one side span down and ran everybody on half a span. Then they brought the other side span down and ran people. It was a little road. It was just Mulholland Drive, I think it was. But here's what's interesting about that. That required closing the freeway. And everybody said it was going to be Carmageddon here in L.A. But the contractors had built into the contract a provision that said that if this work isn't done in 48 hours or whatever the number was, 45 hours, something like that, that they would start paying $50,000 an hour, or I forget what the numbers are, but you get the idea, right? That they were going to start getting charged $50,000 an hour or whatever for every hour over that limit. And that number rose sort of exponentially. So they had some incentive to get the work done. And guess what? Those bridges were down and cleared in about 2/3 of the time that had been allocated for them. Because suddenly now you have incentive to get the job done instead of to keep the job going forever. So that's what I do about the Air Force. That's what I do about all the government things. I just incentivize the things that need to be incentivized. I'd have competition, and I'd have people competing for the government money, and the competition would include not only a price but time guarantees. And if you don't do it on time, then you start getting fined. And you'd be amazed how easy this works, really. It's actually incredibly easy. Some people are talking, I just see in the comment sections, talking about commercials being out of hand. Why don't you join the rest of us swinging kids and get ad block on either Firefox or Chrome, and you will not have this problem again ever. We spent a lot of money and time trying to get to live stream to get away from commercials, just couldn't pull it off. It had to be PC based. I'm not going to get into that again. But if you download either Firefox or Chrome and pick up ad block, these pop-up ads in the Stratosphere Lounge Live will never bother you again. So just a small little thought for for those of you who are complaining about it, because it bothers me crazy too. By the way, we did look into paying to not have the ads done, and I was ready to pay to not have the ads done, but Ustream's policy was, hey, pay us, let's say, $300, $400 a month, no ads. I thought, okay, I can probably do that. And then it became for the first 1,000 listener hours, and then for every listener hour beyond that, they're charging you 50 cents per listener. I was like, it's craziness. It's just insanity. Just get Firefox or Chrome or AdBlock, and your problem solved. Okay, moving on here. Aloe Conson, all of our friends are here tonight, says, how would you reverse the growing horde of mewling, sackless beta males poised to become the majority of American men? That's a tough question. We've talked about this before on the Stratosphere Lounge. We're certainly not going to get into the details of this because this is a whole show. In fact, I think I saw it in one of our suggestions, and I want to do this theme show, and maybe we'll do this theme show next week. But the short form is, I think there is an enormous social need for a kind of a manhood academy. I certainly wouldn't know the first thing about a womanhood academy, but I could run a manhood academy. And so the short answer to your question, Aloe, without getting into all the things we've dredged up before on this topic, since it's about fixing problems, not about the issues so much, is I would start a series of academies, and I'd basically say, hey, listen, for a reasonable amount of money, or maybe make it available online, or maybe make it free, who knows. We'll have discussions with your sons about what being a man is and what the benefits are. And one of the things that's so nice about that is it's sort of a kind of a how do I put this? It's a bit contradictory in a way. Because what you really have to teach young men in order to be men, what you have to teach young males in order to be men, is that you're going to have to step up and defend women, and you're going to have to get in the way of them in danger and violence and all these other things. It's a primary thing, really, that men do, is they protect the women and children. That's, to me, the definition of manhood. Definition of manhood is women and children first when it comes to the lifeboats. Somebody just wrote there's already a manhood academy, and I bet they're talking about the U.S. Marine Corps. And certainly joining the military will get this mostly straightened out for you. But I'm talking about civilians. So basically, the strange contradiction is, and no, David, Big Booty, we're not going to talk about those two letters today. The strange contradiction is you have to explain to young men that part of being a man is you have to do these things for women because that's what you do. And at the same time, they would say, in exchange for this we get. And the answer to that is, in exchange for this you get nothing. Nothing. You don't get leverage. You don't get anything. You have to do it to do it. This is a kind of a theme I've been working with quite a bit lately with conservatives and talking about this whole idea that Russ never sleeps and you have to mow the lawn. There's never a point where, well, I mowed the lawn. I don't have to mow the lawn again. I have to mow the lawn every week if you want a nice lawn, and rust never stops, and you have to paint, and you have to maintain, and all this other stuff. It's just the deal. It's the deal. So you have to explain to young men that when you do these things, you have to do them without expectation of anything in return, because then it's just a transaction, and it can't be a transaction. It has to be an action. With that said, one of the things that we realize, of course, is happening today is that the fourth or fifth or whatever wave of feminist movement that's out there now is not about the right to vote, and it's not about job equality, it's not about equal pay, it's about the destruction of masculinity as its end goal. And it doesn't even make sense anymore. It's not even sensible anymore. It's really just simply to do it because they hate it. And the problem with that is that if they get rid of good men, then they don't get rid of bad men. They just mean that bad men run amok and do whatever they want. So what's unfortunately happening is that every day that goes by, society makes the deal for being a real man worse, makes it a worse deal to be a real man every day. If you don't get, if you get nothing but hectored, and when I say hectored, I don't mean hectored by your wife. I mean, if you get to come home at the end of a long day of toiling and, working and getting up early and staying out late and bringing home the bacon, and you come home and you turn on the TV set And the only role model you have for yourself is this man-child that you see in every single commercial ever made, this bumbling lunatic idiot where the wife is carefully explaining how to balance a checkbook, or the wife is calling the insurance company because the man has driven the golf cart into the pool, or the wife is calmly speaking to whoever because the father's launched a rocket out of the den and the roof is caved in. And if this is all you ever see, you have to start asking yourself, what's the point? What's in it? We did a Clave and Whittle show yesterday, and I hadn't heard the term before, but the term was sexodus. And sexodus is the idea that large numbers of men are just basically leaving this whole. They're just giving up. They're just saying, you know what? I've got my internet porn, and I've got my video games, and that'll do it. Good enough. I don't need any of this crap anymore. One of our producers on the show was on as a host, as a guest rather, and he was saying, yeah, there's no angle in it for men in their late 20s, early 30s. What's the angle? We're gonna be economically distraught, and we get divorced after 2 years and lose half our money, and all we get is put down, and all we get is just mocked and ridiculed, and it's on and on and on. It's just forget it. It's not worth it. And so all these things have to be taught, and the way you teach them, is you teach them. And there is some good news in this, by the way. And some of the good news is that young boys, I can't speak for girls. I just can't. I'm not trying to exclude them because I don't care about them. I'm not trying to exclude them for any other reason other than I just don't know them. I can't speak for them. I can't talk about that. But I can talk about young boys a little bit. And the good news in all of this is that I think virtually all young boys have a very strong sense of just a real burning desire to hear it. They know it when they see it. They know what strength is. They know what a strong father is. Many boys with either absent dads or alcoholic dads or weak dads or chaotic dads or whatever. Many young men find that need in either football in high school or college. They get it from their coach, or they join the military and they get it from the Corps, from the sergeant, or whatever the case may be. But they want it and they need it, and they have a very highly developed sense for it. And you can talk to young males, I should say, about this stuff, and they get it. They're wired to get it. Of course they get it. They're genetically wired to get it. That's why little boys, when you give them, put them in a room to play, the boys will start looking out the window. The girls usually form little circles and start talking to each other and reading each other's social interactions. The boys are looking out the windows and they want to get out the door, and you can tell them you can't play with guns, but they'll pick up a stick and use it as a gun. They automatically know how to do that. And so the problem becomes, it's not a problem actually. The lever is, the good news is, you can basically say to these young men and boys, this is not only not wrong what you're doing, but it's correct and it's right. Then you need to have conversations with young men about how much stronger they are than women, how much faster they are than women. I think young men today, if they heard this, their heads would blow up. But they know it's true. They're not allowed to even think those thoughts, let alone speak those thoughts. If I was going to run a young man academy, I would say, boys, you're faster than these women are. You're stronger than they are. That's why you have to do these things. You have to do them because you're that much more physically powerful. And of course, you can't really expect men to be men unless the women step up and do their half too, right? When it comes right down to it, when a man gets a door for a woman, or walks on the street side of the sidewalk for a woman, or opens a car door for women, does any of these little things, puts their bags in the overhead compartment for women, does all these things that require, or at least are based on a history of requiring greater physical strength. Those are acts of courtesy, and they should be replied to with acts of courtesy and acts of affection. It's not a transaction. You don't put somebody's bag up in the overhead compartment for her in order to get her phone number or in order to have her owe you something. But, the fact of the matter is, it's just what kind people do. And I think the final thing I'll say on this, because ultimately this is really what it comes down to, is I think you have to show them, Aloe, I think you have to show people, men and women both, how much better life is with, let's just say, modified traditional roles. And the only reason I throw the modified in there is because I absolutely, certainly, without question, do believe that women should have the right to pursue any career they want to. Needless to say, they should have full access to the human experience, needless to say, and for jobs that they do equally as men, they should get paid the same as men, needless to say. And they do. You simply can't say, I've got two transcriptionists here, and one's a man and one's a woman. I'm going to pay the man 30% more than the woman. That never happens. It is true men make more money than women do, but if you look at I think Glenn Reynolds at Insupundent had a graph of fatalities, workplace fatalities in terms of accidents, and the number of workplace fatalities in terms of on-the-job accidents that kill people. I think the number was 93 or 94% of all workplace fatalities are men, and 7% are women. Maybe it's even more than that. But let's say it's 95.5. It's pretty close to that. If 95% of the total workplace accidents kill men, and women are making up half the workforce, then what you're really figuring out is men are doing more dangerous jobs than women. And since they're doing more dangerous jobs than women, they should get paid more money for it. That's what this income disparity thing's about. So look, the dating situation in LA is a little more advanced than it is in the rest of the country. And when I say advanced, I mean it's crazier. And when I say advanced, I don't mean it's better. I mean it's crazier sooner than the rest of the country. And so what I can tell you is what the dynamic in LA is that the women are angry and the men are weak. And that's why everybody's so miserable. Weak men make women angry, and angry women make men weak. And somebody's got to break this cycle, and somebody's got to stop this kind of spiral. And the people that have to break it, the people that have to break this cycle are the men. So I have to tell you, and I certainly don't mean I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but frankly, when I see these men's group things, well, we're going to have a men's group, and we're going to talk about men's rights, and we're going to talk about all these things that, it's like, honestly, yeah, we're going to go out in the jungle, and we're going to beat drums, and we're going to sit in a circle, and we're going to live like hunters, and tell campfire stories, and smear our faces with paint, and get in touch with our maleness. And I said, why do you want to do that? And there's because women have, completely emasculated us. It's like, well, they may have emasculated you, but they haven't emasculated me. Nobody gets to do that to me. No one gets to take away my pride. I don't care what feminists have to say about me. It bounces off of me like water off the back of a duck. If I run into somebody who says, hey, women need men like a fish needs a bicycle, then I say, enjoy your bicycle, or enjoy your lack of bicycle, fishy. Knock yourself out, kid. But that's not how society's going. Women are more and more and more unhappy. And the reason they're more and more and more unhappy is because there are fewer and fewer and fewer real men. And I'm telling you, as somebody who's been out in the dating scene out there, genuine strength, actual strength, which is not strutting, and it's not arrogance, and it's certainly not violence or puffery or machoism, but just genuine quiet strength and confidence, is just irresistible. It's irresistible, and it should be irresistible. So that's where I would go with it. If I were to, since your question was, how would you reverse the growing horde of mewing sackless beta males, I would show them and tell them how much more fun life is if you're not one of those guys. In other words, if you're saying, what do you do with this crowd of losers, Bill? I'd show them how much more fun it is to be a winner than a loser. Any questions? It's infinitely better to be a winner than a loser. Infinitely better. Just takes a little bit of courage. And courage and confidence are things that can be learned. They really can be learned, really learned. You can learn them just like you learn anything else. It's little steps. You do little things that you're afraid to do, and you do it, and maybe you get shot down, or maybe you don't. And then the one time you don't get shot down, that's like evidence. It's like, oh, well, it worked out better than I thought. And then you try it again. It gives you a little more confidence. You do it again, you get shot down, maybe you don't. More evidence, more confidence. And then all of a sudden you're on this spiral, this upward spiral instead of a downward spiral. And you find rather quickly that the more confidence you have, the more of a positive reaction you get, and then things happen very quickly. I can't put my finger on it, but it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago for me where I really kind of hit that critical mass of having a certain amount of confidence and poise in myself, which wasn't dependent on anybody's opinion of me. I just didn't care. I just liked the work I was doing enough, and I liked who I was enough. That when you reach a certain level, then magical things happen. Then you realize, holy cow, you're talking to a guy talking to a guy right now who wore turtleneck sweaters and calculators on his belt all through high school and watched cheerleaders like cross the other side of the hall so they didn't have to be on the same side of the hall as me. So I know where I'm coming from on this one. All of a sudden, you may not look different, you may not dress different, you may not seem different, but you emit a different kind of light. And people who used to ignore you aren't ignoring you anymore. And you walk into a room and you realize, without saying anything, you say, oh my God, a lot of people, that chick is looking at me. You're damn right she is. And that raises your confidence even higher, and off you go. So, yeah, it's the same thing. It would be, guys, it's better to be strong than to be weak. The payoff is better. The work is harder. As with everything else, what do you want? Do you want the reward or do you want the ease? Because if you want the reward, it's easy. It's not easy, rather. You will get the reward. So, anyway, that's where you go. Just, I could do it, and I might just have to. Just do an internet course on it. I bet I could put some DVDs together, make a ton of money. Write that down, Des. Ton of money, DVD, Manhood Academy, and why don't you just go ahead and call U-Haul right now and rent an 18-foot truck to haul the money away in, because that's, let's just get all that just taken care of out of the way. All right, moving on here. David Holy says, how would you tackle the problem with the mostly left-leaning teachers' unions? Would you try to eliminate them altogether, or would it be more feasible to just change their purpose from job retention and political influence to primarily focusing on education for the betterment of the child? I'm glad I get a question about unions. I want to be clear about unions. People, free citizens, have the right to bargain collectively. Any questions? This is a free country, and one of the freedoms that you have in this country is the freedom to associate with other people in your occupation to bargain collectively. I have no problem with this at all. None. I don't generally like the output of unions, but I would never ban them. I would never outlaw them. Public sector unions are a different story, because public sector unions, there is no competition, there's no way around them, and both management and labor are on the same side of the table. That's different. But I have no problem with unions whatsoever. And as I often say about unions, when I say I have no problem with them, I have no problem with the existence of them. I don't like, generally speaking, I think they're bad. But I would never take away a person's right to unionize. I don't believe in taking away people's freedom. And one of the freedoms that people have is the freedom to collectively bargain and to get together, and it makes perfect sense to me, in the same way that you should have the freedom to collectively start a corporation, right? No problem there. However, what you get into is with unions of any kind, when you start finding out that when the union no longer has the power to take the dues out of your paycheck and you have to write a check for union dues, union membership drops by 70%. It's astonishing. It's astonishing when the coercion that the unions use is removed and people are left with a choice. Do I join the union, yes or no? Is it a right to work state, yes or no? It should be a right to work country, obviously. Then unions don't do so well. And the reason they don't do so well is because the conditions that once made unions powerful don't exist anymore. And so, look, I would say the answer to this, David, is actually very simple, and we always go back to core principles, right? I do. Whenever I face a question, I didn't read these before we got started. Whenever I face a question, I kind of go back to, what are my core principles? What do I believe works, and why? So my core value is freedom, human freedom. And so where does that take me on the union issue? Doesn't tell me I should ban unions or make them illegal, but it does tell me that if people are free to compete, then people will eventually put unions out of business because they'll provide better services at a lower cost. That's it. The reason we have school unions, this is what you were talking about here, is the teachers' unions, so I'm going from the general to the specific here. Of course they're left-leaning unions. What they're designed to do is to treat students as little boxes, little units. A student is a unit, and you have to graduate a certain number of units per year. A certain number of boxes have to come out of the back end of the factory and get loaded onto a truck. And if all that matters is a graduation rate, then it doesn't matter if the thing in the box is well made or badly made. It doesn't matter if the thing in the box is broken. It doesn't matter if the thing in the box is missing parts. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't even matter if there's anything in the box at all. All that matters is that the box gets out of the ramp and gets loaded onto the truck. So when you're judging success by graduation rates, you're going to get crappy students, because it's easier to graduate a bad student than it is to graduate a good student. That's pretty straightforward. And so the answer to this question, David, comes to the answer of all other questions that I deal with. And this is the nice thing about having a consistent philosophy, is it holds up. And it's the nice thing about having this philosophy, because I don't have to lie to you or myself. I don't have to say I'm in favor of high taxes and then go tell my accountant to pay as few taxes as possible. I get to tell the truth. So I would say, hey, great, you got a public school with public sector unions, fantastic. We are going to make sure that you do not legally lock out either private schooling or homeschooling or anything like that. And furthermore, if you choose not to put your children into this public school, you should have a right to get the money back that you're paying in education so that you can put it someplace else in the form of a voucher or something like that. Unions are mortified, terrified, horrified of this idea and fight it tooth and nail. And the reason they fight competition tooth and nail is because they understand the power of competition. I was talking with a friend of mine not long ago. We were heading to Vegas, and she'd spent some time in the communist bloc in Hungary. And a five-star hotel in Budapest, they didn't have butter 4 days out of the year. I'm sorry, 4 days out of the week. They just didn't have butter. They couldn't deliver it. You go to Las Vegas, pretty much everything you want is there, and at very high quality and at a relatively low price. It's the difference between competition and non-competition. In a state-run economy, they can't put butter on the table of a five-star hotel that is mostly visited by overseas celebrities with lots of cash. They can't even put butter on the table 5 days out of the week. Here in America, if you work hard and you have a job, you can live like a king or an emperor, or way beyond an emperor or a pasha. A standard room in a hotel like the Bellagio in Vegas, no one prior to the 20th century, no one prior to the 1940s has ever lived like that. And any working man can do that in America. How dare you say? What do you mean, how dare you say? It's obviously true. If it's your priority, if you want to go to Vegas, you can probably save enough money to go once a year. You can certainly go once every couple years and live like a king. And so, it all comes down to competition. So I just open it to competition, David, and I can't get off the education subject without saying something I just need to be hammering again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Homeschooling, I think, is terrific, but homeschooling is a great principle, but it's an incredible burden, and it shouldn't have to be the burden. In other words, it shouldn't have to be you educating your children. It should be your neighborhood educating your neighborhood's children. And when I say your neighborhood, I mean the people who think like you in your neighborhood. And the thing I keep coming back to with homeschooling in this country is the single greatest resource in this country is retired people. How many retired people are there within a 2-mile radius of your house, or a 1-mile radius? How many chemical engineers are there to teach chemistry? How many accountants are there, retired accountants, to teach accounting and economics? And you wouldn't have to pay them much. Most of them, I bet you wouldn't even have to pay at all. And so instead of, I actually had this thought, I was talking about this up in Mountain View just a couple days ago. Why is it that when we're talking about educating our children, which is supposedly one of the most important, probably the most important single thing we do, why is it that we turn out a 24-year-old or a 23-year-old individual who has a degree in education, and then because they have a degree in education, we expect that they should be able to educate people in chemistry, physics, biology, math, English, Spanish, wood shop, metal shop, geography, all of it. Doesn't it make more sense to have people who are chemists be able to pick up a few credits in education rather than having a person who's an education major studying a little bit of chemistry so they can muddle their way through teaching chemistry? Wouldn't it make more sense to take a chemist and say, oh, and if you want to pick up another 5 credits, 10, 15 credits, here's how you teach chemistry. We don't have to teach you chemistry because you're a chemist, but if you want to know how to teach chemistry, here's how you do it. Wouldn't that be better? And shouldn't the ability to teach kids just be the ability to pass the test? Shouldn't you be able to say, here's how I pass the test, here's how I explain things? Yeah, that's off you go, great. I'm not a certified flight instructor, and I've wanted to be. I could do it rather easily. The one thing I don't want to do about being a CFI is to be constantly on top of the regulations. That's the main reason I don't do it. The number of rules are changing so fast that I just don't want to go to the trouble of staying on top of them. But that doesn't mean that I'm not a great flight instructor. I'm a great flight instructor, and I'm a great ground instructor. I make aviation and aerodynamics understandable to anybody, and I make it fun. I'm a college dropout. I could never get a degree. I could never teach fundamental aeronautics or aerodynamics in a high school, or they just wouldn't let me in the building. But I do a better job than some 24-year-old who has a degree in education would. I can assure you of that. So, look, it's like everything else. Get people out of the system. Parallel structures, small structures, local structures. But don't forget the retired people. They're that giant asset of expertise and passion and real knowledge, practical knowledge. So there you go. Let's see. Carsten Mueller says, would you spend time and money to restore the constitutional republic we once had, or would you use time and money to find a new place to start over? Carsten, it's funny you say that, because in the darkest days of the Obama administration, before he really started making so many mistakes that it was just a giant goat rodeo, a bunch of my friends and I had a talk about that. And the talk basically, I never really took it seriously, but the talk was, where would you go? And my feeling is I would go someplace remote and cold. If I had to set up another government someplace, I'd choose Antarctica. And I choose Antarctica because Antarctica is very difficult. And it's only that Antarctica is 100 million times easier than the moon or Mars that I would choose Antarctica. I think even Alaska is too close to these people. But look, what we all came up with is this. This is what many of us came up with is, let's just say you wanted to start over. Where would you go? I'm not starting a republic in the jungle. I'm just not. I'm not. Maybe other people want to, but I'm not. I am not going to live in Guyana or Honduras or in the back of Africa or in parts of Southeast Asia. I don't want to have my republic in a jungle. And I think North America is the most beautiful place in the world. New Zealand's very nice too. But no, I'm not giving this country up, and I'm not going to walk away from it. You do need time and money to restore the constitutional republic. And you know what, folks? You know what you need to spend the time and money on? Is you need to spend the time and money on movies. I know that sounds self-serving because I'm a filmmaker, but when you get right down to it, it's not self-serving. I'm not a filmmaker to make money. I'm a filmmaker because telling stories is what I like to do, and telling stories about America is what I like to do more than anything else. And it's the stories that win people's votes and win people's votes and win people's votes. So if you really want to save America and dedicate time and money to it, then put it into movies. Make people tell stories about why this country works and what's great about it. And I don't want to live in another geographical location, and I sure as heck don't want to set this whole thing up again. I don't see any reason to. We get so discouraged because this 10% or 5% of the population that really controls the media, the music, the news media, movies, and now politics. These hardcore progressives are 5% of the country. The other 45, 46, 47% that vote with them only vote with them because we've done such an appallingly bad job of making our case. I could flip this entire country. I could have this country voting 95-5 if I could talk to every single American individually for an hour. But I don't get to do that. So, yeah, you know what? Let's just keep it here and take it here, and I don't want to give it up, and I don't want to go anywhere else. Recover the culture, and you recover the country. It's really just that simple. Brian Hughes says, with some exceptions, commercial air travel in the U.S. is losing money and everyone hates it. You now own all the airlines, Mr. Pilot Man. How would you make them profitable and not soul-suckingly horrible? And Brian, if I now owned all the airlines, the first thing I would do is sell all the airlines. And once deregulation happened, what we're finding is, as much as I hate to say this because I'm kind of thinking this through as I go, we have large numbers. We have several airlines in competition in this country, at least 5, 6, 7 in most markets, at least 7 or 8 different airlines in competition. And the reason, Brian, I hate to be the guy to break this to you, the reason that they're so soul-suckingly awful or horrible is because that's what people want. And they don't want it to be horrible. But what what the horrible qualities about airline travel are, particularly things like the leg room and things like that, and the abandonment of in-flight meals and all those things that used to make air travel so much better in the old days. The reason that there are no in-flight meals and the reason that the seats are so close together now is because by abandoning in-flight meals and packing more people into a limited space, airlines can afford to fly people for a lower fare. And it's just that simple. They're cattle cars because that's what people want. I'm not one of these people who's like saying the American people are so stupid, and no, it makes sense. People are buying airline tickets based on price, and it makes perfect sense. If you get a chance to fly from California to Florida, and you can do it for $167 as opposed to $480, and get less legroom and no meal, most people would say, I can endure 5 hours in an airplane seat. And it's not like endure 5 hours in an airplane seat versus walking or versus standing up in the baggage compartment. Most people would rather save the money and have a little less legroom and not have a meal, and get the meal in the concourse. Now, with that said, the reverse should be true, and the reverse is true. Virgin America is a tremendous experience. I just can't tell you how much I love flying that airline. Everywhere I go, I fly Virgin America because they make it interesting and cool and fun, and they still put people in airplanes, but just as a little tiny thing. I mean, just a little thing, but it's not a little thing. It's actually a big thing. I don't know if you knew this. If you've never flown Virgin, you didn't know this, but let's take one of the things that makes airline travel less fun than it could be. Let's take the food service. On every other airline I've ever been on, you sit in your seat and then, you climb out. Once you level off, a series of flight attendants push a drink cart up to the front, and they ask, would you like a drink? Would you like a drink? You get a little Coke about that big with some ice, and you sometimes, you ask for the can, and they usually give you the can, but you run out of ice, and then they disappear, and they're gone for an hour, and they might have one or two items of food, and if you want a drink later, you're not really able to get a drink later, and so on 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 and so on. But Virgin doesn't operate that way. Virgin America says, hey, we've got every single airplane has in-seat entertainment. You get to watch your own movies, you get to watch your own TV, you get to watch whatever you want. And they also have something that's so simple that I can't believe that no one else is doing it. What Virgin has is Virgin basically has a shopping cart. And Virgin, if you want to eat on Virgin, you go to the screen and you say, I'll take that sandwich, I'll take that drink, that snack, and that dessert. 1, 2, 3, 4, puts it in your shopping cart, swipe your card. Keep open a tab if you want to or not. And then the flight attendants bring you your meal, which is just your meal, including your drink, when you want it, anytime during the flight. And it's so simple to do, and it's so much better. Because now you don't feel guilty. And it's like, you're on a 5-hour flight. They offer you a sandwich an hour into it. You're not hungry. 2 hours into it, you're starting to get hungry. 3 hours into it, you're quite hungry. And, they don't take too kindly. Could you bring me the sandwich? I'm sorry, sir, the meal service has already ended. So, I don't know what to say about that other than Virgin does it, and that's why I fly Virgin. And their prices are incredibly competitive, really incredibly competitive. So I think it's possible to to actually have the market do the job. You may want to try a different airline. And look, man, I don't mean to be, a jerk about this, but the fact is, if you really want a much better experience in terms of your flying, then I would try first class, because occasionally on speaking engagements I get to fly first class, and first class is different than coach. First class is real different than coach. First class is a whole nother world. First one's on, first one's off. No middle seats. Seats are twice as wide. Legroom's is quite much more. You can recline far enough back so that you can sleep before the plane takes off. Your own private flight attendant who's responsible only for the 8 of you, or whatever the case may be. Would you care for some water? Would you care for a drink before we take off? I've been on first class flights. Would you like some heated nuts? Sure, why not? Heated nuts sound delightful. Let's have a few of those. Why not? Fantastic. Thank you. There's somebody at your beck and call 24 hours a day of that flight, and they're right there with you, and you get to go flat on your back most of the time and sleep the whole way. And your response to that will be, yes, but first class is very, very expensive. And it is very, very expensive. And this is kind of the point I'm trying to make. If you don't like the suck, pay your way out of the suck. And the reason air travel is the way it is now is because it's deregulated. Most people, myself included until very recently, when given the choice, in fact, I thought this my whole life until very recently. When I say recently, 2-3 years ago, I've changed my mind. But used to be that, if you were an actor, for example, would have to be flown first class because of SAG rules. And apparently they would give the actor the choice. They would say, you can fly first class, or you can fly coach and get the difference. In other words, the producer is required to fly you out there first class. However, if the first class ticket is $1,200 and the coach ticket is $300, you can either fly the first class ticket for $1,200, or you can fly coach and they'll give you the $900 difference. And I remember thinking, I'd take the $900 in cash every single time. Every single time. And that's the decision most people make, honestly, Brian. Most people would rather save the $900. It's a 5-hour flight or whatever, yeah. I'd much rather have the $900 or whatever the difference is. But if you would really like to get away from the soul-suckingly horrible, if you want to pay that extra $900 or $400 or $600 or whatever, I'm here to tell you, if you travel a lot, and especially if you're dealing with company revenues and stuff like that, man, that is something. That's something. So there you go. 2 to go, 3 to go. Real quick. Jolaz Star Killer says, and I'm going to guess that's not your real name, Mr. Star Killer. Dear Mr. Widow, how would you make sure that we have access to fully automatic weapons, missile launchers, etc.? This is a very tough question to answer, and I got to be honest with you, Jolaz, I don't think I have time to get into this in its detail. First of all, virtually all of us have access to automatic weapons. Well, I don't have a fully automatic weapon. I have a semi-automatic weapon. I'm limited to 10 rounds in California and a bullet button, which means that I'm not allowed by law to have a detachable magazine, but the definition of a detachable magazine is a magazine that is detachable without the use of a tool. So working around a bad law in California, I have an AR-15 assault rifle, and I have a 10-round magazine, and by taking the tip of a 5.56 round and pushing it into a recessed clip, I am using a tool, and because I'm using a tool that is not a detachable magazine, and therefore I can drop that magazine in just slightly more time than it would take somebody who doesn't live in a state run by communists. I have a semi-automatic weapon. I'm not allowed to make it full automatic, but it may not come as a surprise to you to know that, as far as I know, and certainly I'm probably get a lot of feedback on this right away, I don't believe that the Army has fully automatic rifles anymore. I don't think the M4s that they distribute to our soldiers in the field, I don't think they have a fully automatic setting anymore. I'm fairly sure that they don't. They have single-shot semi-auto, they have a 3-round burst, and they have a safety, because this idea of just pulling the trigger and spraying bullets, horrifying though it is to liberals, frankly, if somebody's shooting at me, and I have to run from point A to point B in an open space, and I hear, I like that much better than, because that guy is aiming. And I am more worried about guys that aim. And our soldiers are trained to aim. And one of the things I think is so interesting about our troops overseas now is that if you look at the weapons that these guys are carrying, if you looked at the guys even in the Gulf War, even in the beginning of the Iraq invasion, the standard soldier in the field was had a M16 or an M4 with iron sights with the carry handle, traditional looking M16 thing, which is basically you hold it up and you aim it with iron sights. But I haven't seen anybody in the field lately that didn't have optics. And why is that so important? It's important because if you have optics, a magnifying scope, a 3-power scope or something like that, that means that you can take these guys out before they get into range. I don't need to spray fully automatic bullets down there. I want to hit a guy, well, I've got him in my range, but I'm not in his range. I want my engagement circle to be larger than his. So I like the idea of a semi-automatic rifle that I can pull the trigger on as fast as I can get the crosshairs over this guy. Yeah, I think somebody just said 3-round burst is pretty much it. And the reason is because if you're going, as anybody who's ever fired a fully automatic weapon knows, you simply cannot maintain control of it. Now, I'm going to hear something about this too, but let's just say most people cannot maintain control of it. The thing just starts flying around all over the place. So, to some degree, as frightening as it is for us to see, these gun control guys, the gun control side of the argument has been taking a thrashing. I mean, taking a thrashing. It's been gun rights wins for 10, 12, 15 years now. The 9th District Circus, I heard it described that the first time just a couple nights ago. The 9th District Circus is basically said, of course you have a right to concealed carry in California. So we're winning all across the board here. The real issue, of course, is missile launchers and anti-tank weapons and rocket launchers and atomic weapons and nuclear missiles and those kind of things. And people will try to take the argument into how much weaponry should you be allowed to have. And my first inclination would be to say, how much can you afford? But it's a serious issue, and I'm not going to get into it because it's not that I don't want to, it's just I don't have time. But basically, there are two arguments you can make. One of the argument is bear arms means to carry them. So, you could bear, to bear an arm is to carry an arm, is to bear, you bear something, you carry it. So you could make the case that what the Second Amendment is doing is saying the government cannot infringe on your ability to have weapons that you can bear, that you can carry, keep and bear. You can keep a tank in the garage, but you can't carry a tank into battle. So you could make the case that will be, a limitation would be something that is shoulder launchable, something that is man-pad, man-portable. But I think the better argument is simply this. I think that an American citizen ought to be able to arm himself with whatever weapons the government is going to come after him with. And if they're going to come after you with pistols, you should be able to have pistols and rifles. If they come after you with rifles, you should be able to have rifles and things of that nature. Nowadays, with police forces being as militarized as they are, but I'm not blaming this on the police. If somebody really wanted to come after you, if they came after you, they'd probably come after you with tanks and come after you with Predator drones. So if they're coming after you with tanks, then yeah, I'm kind of in favor of having an anti-tank round. And I'm kind of in favor of the right to keep and bear Stinger missiles, both of which are bearable. I can bear them. I can carry them with me into battle. I think you probably need the ability to stop the government from coming to kill you. If people look at you like you're mad, but seriously, all you have to do is read the history of Bolshevism or the Russians and realize, 100 million, 200 million people killed by their own government. That's probably the second leading cause of death among people after disease. It's well ahead of war and religious wars. I mean, seriously, I think these principles have to hold, and you have to ask yourself too. Now, needless to say, does a guy have a right to nuclear weapons? I think he does not. I mean, you're starting to deal now with the ability of somebody swinging their fist to, make everybody's day kind of a bad day. You also have to ask yourself, do you need nuclear weapons to defend yourself against the government or against assault? You don't have the right to keep and bear arms in order to annihilate cities or in order to conquer territories or in order to do any of these things. You have the right to keep and bear arms to defend yourself, your family, and your property against transgression. And it is a defensive right, this natural right. It's not an offensive right. I don't know if it'd be much good to have a nuclear hand grenade. I just don't think I could throw it far enough. And so, sometimes we get so far reactive to these arguments being used against us that we ourselves find ourselves in the weeds. And I don't want to find myself in the weeds. I don't think I need nuclear weapons to defend myself. In fact, I know I don't need nuclear weapons to defend myself. I need the weapons that I need to defend myself and my family against crime, the government, and so on. It didn't used to be in my worldview that they would use tanks against American citizens but now it is, because they understand that we're all armed, right? The only way they're going to get the weapons out of this country is if they come after us with tanks, because if they come after us with rifles, they're going to be in for a bit of a shock, and they know it, and everybody knows it. So, if they're really talking about using tanks now on the American people, then give the American people anti-tank weapons. But that doesn't mean you've got the right to have an offensive arsenal. You have the right to defend yourself. I could go on for this for days, but I think we pretty much get the full idea here. 2 to go. Dan Ramsey wants to know, given unlimited budget, describe the Stratocon you would plan. Boy, that's a question for Astro Girl over here too. Des, if we had unlimited money, the big question is, where would you do it? Where would you hold it? I kind of want to say Vegas. I don't know why. Vegas. Yeah, I kind of want to say Vegas because, number one, it's cheap to get in and out of Vegas. And number two, man, I saw a show in Vegas not too long ago. Pardon me? Free booze. Free booze. There's that. And you know what? On some level, folks, Vegas and Nevada is one of the freest places in the world. So if you had it in Vegas, you could have all the gambling you wanted to go with it, all the alcohol, you have all the broads. You can do whatever you want to do in Vegas. So there's that. Vegas is opulent. It's just opulent. I don't particularly like Vegas personally. I mean, I'm in Vegas. First 24 hours in Vegas, I have a fine time. If I'm there more than 27, 28 hours, I start to get nervous. And if I'm there the morning of a third day, I will crawl over broken glass to get out of Vegas. But I think maybe Vegas might be cool. Dallas might be cool, and I'd like to have it big, and I'd like to find a way to have it be big and intimate at the same time. One thing I would not do in Stratocon, which you so often see in these political conventions, is I would not have anything parallel happening. I wouldn't have in room A we've got this, and in room B we have that. I've never liked that. My feeling is, why don't we give the people that come to this convention the very best show we can all the time, full time, and if the panel's worth having, it's worth having to be seen by everybody. And if it's not something that's worth being seen by everybody, then probably we shouldn't be wasting people's time. So I think I'd probably do it in Vegas, and I think I would invite a number of people. I think one of the things that would be nice to have would be have a fair amount of alcohol flowing freely among the people who are doing the talking. Because, I'm sorry about the spike there, because, people tell the truth when they're a little lit up. And I just recently found it when I posted the speech I did for the David Horowitz Freedom Center back in November, and that was a morning speech. But I'd been looking for it since November, and finally Jeremy sent me the link to it, and I have to post this. In fact, if you can make a note of this, Des, it means it'll get done, because if I think I'm going to do something, nothing ever happens. But if she thinks something has to happen, then it gets done. But there was a panel that we did down there with me, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Clavin, and Jeremy Boring, and it was a Truth Revolt panel and a video panel. And I actually learned something in that panel. I didn't learn it from Clavin, obviously, but not only did I learn something in that panel, but it's great to be up there with your peers, except for Clavin, obviously, and it was real snappy and a lot like what I want this speakeasy to be. But it was really just fun and quick and cool. So I'm going to post a link to that, because it's about an hour long. But there's actual information in there. But we're actually having fun, because Ben and Jeremy and Andrew Clavin and I are all friends, except for Clavin, obviously, and we like having fun, and it should be fun, and that's what I want Speakeasy to be. I don't care what we talk about. I care about how we talk about it very much. So, I think it would be big and big enough to get a lot of people there. I'd like to move it around. I'd like to do one every, once a season, once every 3 or 4 months. I do one in the Northwest, one in the South, move it around. And the main thing I think is that, I think the main thing would be that we ought to structure it in such a way so that everybody who's either on stage or on a panel or speaking has a chance to speak to everybody. In other words, everybody who attends that conference should have a chance to not just shake hands with people that they came to see, but to actually talk to them. And the reason I think this is so important is not for you. It's for me. It's for me and the guys on stage. We learn so much from talking to real people. We just learn so much. I never cease to be amazed at how much I learn from the people who I go out and speak with and not to with. And people often say to me, people who pick me up for these events from the airport, hey, do you have time to do questions or take some pictures afterwards? I'll be the last person out of the room. Not just because it's the right thing to do, and it is the right thing to do, but also because I learned so much and have so much fun. I really love it. I love meeting people. I was at Mountain View. I bet she's watching right now. I was up at Mountain View a couple days ago, and somebody came up to me and said, hey, just wanted to say hi. I'm a Strata Lounger, and I'll see you at Speakeasy. And it was like catching up with a lost half sister or something. It's like, oh, well, that's so nice. I feel like we've known each other. Well, we do know each other, kind of. I mean, we've been doing this 90 episodes at 3 hours a pop or something. There's a fair amount of conversation going back and forth. And so I think it's really important for the people who would come to the con, both as visitors and also as panelists, for people to sit there and have a chance to talk to them and get to know them a little bit, except for Andrew Klavan, obviously. Yeah. So I think it'd be big and brassy and loud, and the sound would be good. It'd be well catered. It would be easy parking, and it would give us time to be both big and small at the same time. And our final question comes from Sang Lim for the top 10 questions tonight. And he said, how would you simply walk into Mordor, Bill? And my answer is I would do it rather charmingly. I think it'd be my answer. I think I do it with a certain amount of charm and swagger. Not swagger, just charm. Just like, how you doing? How's everybody going? Orcs out there? Yeah. So listen, it doesn't have to be this bad, man. You can live better than this, you poor little orcs. I don't know how you walk into Mordor, except to saying that you do, right? You just do. You have to. Maybe you sneak into Mordor. Maybe you sprint into Mordor. Maybe you hike into Mordor. Maybe you march into Mordor. Maybe you fly into Mordor. Maybe you tunnel into Mordor. But I know the question was kind of a joke, but the serious answer is you've got to be prepared to walk into Mordor. And if you're not, then bad things happen to you and everybody else. Was doing a Q&A up there at Mountain View a couple days ago, and somebody asked me about this Muslim terrorism thing, and is Islam incompatible with America and all that stuff. I said, well, look, it's not incompatible with America. Most of the people millions, the huge majority of Muslims in America are hardworking people. They're good family people. They have solid values, and they have no desire whatsoever to hurt other people or anything like that. It's an absolute fact. I mean, we got to start there. And look, there's no but attached to this. There's no reversal to that position. It's the truth. The huge majority of American Muslims are terrific, terrific people. It's not a but, because everything after the but is the truth. So it's not but, it's and. The problem is, I understand the power of fear. I know what historically, I've never had experience here in this country. I criticize the President of the United States every day. I'm not afraid of him. And the reason I'm not afraid of him is because of all the men and women who've gone and died for me out in foreign soil for 250 years to keep me free. The freedom's in my blood and my bones. I'm not afraid of the President of the United States. I'm not afraid of anything that's going to happen to me because I speak about the President of the United States. And that freedom from fear is a debt that I owe to the veterans of this country, both living and dead. With that said, I understand why so many domestic Muslims are scared. They're scared because the same reason other people are scared. But this is the point that does need to be said. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, the anti-Japanese sentiment in this country was so strong that we interred American citizens who had no business being interred. It was a Democrat that did that. And what happened was, after Pearl Harbor, huge numbers of Japanese Americans enlisted in the armed forces, and they had to send them to Europe because they were afraid if they sent them to the Pacific, not only would some of them be killed by accident, some of them might be murdered by mostly Marines who were so hot at the treachery and the barbarism of the actual Japanese. But after Pearl Harbor, huge numbers of Japanese Americans enlisted and served with unbelievable courage. The personal level of commendation and the unit citations for Japanese American units serving in Europe is off the hook. And the reason is because they had something to prove, and what they had to prove is they had to prove that they were Americans first and Japanese second. And that won them certainly my respect, and I think many people's respect. And I'm not seeing that today among American Muslims. And there will be consequences to this. And the consequences are as follows. I understand if you're a Muslim in America and you're terrified about speaking out against these animals and barbaric murderers and torturers and terrorists and all the rest of it. I understand what they do to apostates. I understand what they do to I understand the fear, and I understand that well, I would say. However, what you need to understand is this. There is a price to be paid for you being silent. And the price that you will pay for being silent is the same price that the German people paid for being silent, because the huge majority of the German people weren't Nazis either. But they went along with the Nazis. They didn't go along with the Nazis because they particularly agreed with the Nazis. They went along with the Nazis because they were afraid of the Gestapo. They went along with the Nazis because they were afraid of the SA and the SS. They were afraid of the brown shirts. They were afraid of the ruffians. They were afraid of the thugs, so they didn't say anything. And most Germans did not know about the death camps, but most Germans at the same time certainly did know that neighbors of theirs were being removed forcibly at night and taking places that they didn't care to ask questions about. So, when you are silent, you become complicit. And the more silent you remain, the more the fear grows. And the more the fear grows, the more silent people become. And the next thing you know, things get very, 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 very bad. The German people paid an enormous price for their silence. People who were never Nazis, who were not concentration camp guards, and people who may even have despised the Nazis, had their houses bombed to rubble around them, and their sons and fathers and husbands and daughters and sons and fathers and killed, and their daughters and wives and mothers raped by the Russians. They did it because they paid the price because they were silent, and the whole German culture paid that price. And likewise, the Japanese culture paid the price for the militants in the Japanese Imperial High Command. So I would simply say this: your silence is not only disgraceful, it's understandable, but it's disgraceful. But it will bring about the kind of response that nobody wants to see. I've said for the longest time that America has not been fully angry, since 1945. It's the last time America was fully angry. There was some stand-up comedian, I forget who he was, I think it was an Indian, East Indian guy, I don't remember for sure, but it was some stand-up comedian, foreign-born stand-up comedian, who said, you'll know America's really angry with you because when America's really angry with you, they're not going to drop 10,000 bombs on you, they're going to drop 2 bombs. And, yeah. So, look, if Muslims, and they do, if Muslims have a right to live in this, needless to say, they have a right to live in this country. They don't need my permission to live in this country. And you could be a law-abiding Muslim in this country, but by remaining silent about this, by not standing up the way that the Japanese did after Pearl Harbor, you are becoming complicit in the crimes. Complicit is not the same as sin of omission is not the same as a sin of commission, but the results will be the same. You're silent in the same way that these Germans were silent when they knew that they should be speaking up and didn't, out of fear. And, the funny thing about this is that fear, like courage, is a self-reinforcing cycle. The more frightened people are, the more frightened people become. And the more courageous people are, the more courageous they become. And so we simply have to say, it's time to stand up and speak the truth. And that's what the guys at Charlie did, and a bunch of them were killed for it. And they're braver than the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post, which won't do it, which won't put our founding principles above, fear of these people. And it's only because these terrorist savages know that we're afraid that they get away with this. Ultimately, the responsibility comes down to the commander-in-chief. If the commander-in-chief made it crystal clear that the murdering of our civilians or the murdering of any civilians in the name of Islamic terrorism was going to be met with overwhelming, destructive, crushing military force, then this problem would go away, and everybody knows it. But we don't have that kind of moral courage right now. But it's still here, and it's still in the country, and we've got to remember that fear does funny things to people. But Muslim Americans also need to remember that they are either Muslims first or Americans first. The Japanese Americans made that decision. Italian Americans who went to serve in World War II and fight in Italy and kill Italians made that decision. German Americans who shipped overseas in the U.S. Army to kill Germans made that decision. And they made it clearly, and I'm not seeing it here. And the very few times I do see it, those people are absolutely destroyed, not only by the Muslims, but also by the left. They're destroyed. So be aware of consequences. That's all I would say. And that is 10 questions on what I would do if I had all the money and all the power and all the time in the world. If I had all the power in the world, I would immediately divest myself of it before it began to work its way into my brain and start telling me about all the good things I could do if I had all the power in the world. The video that I've got to get finished right now as soon as I turn the lights off is called The Road to Hell, and it's about how good intentions don't create these awful situations, but the idea of good intentions is a fig leaf which masks for us the fact that the things that we think are doing good are actually doing harm. So I have to get to work on that and get that thing done. So anyway, it's good to be here. Good to be back as always. As an episode, 89, something like that, and somewhere in that ballpark. We're getting there. We're going to have a 100th episode jubilee. If you're going to be at Speakeasy, we'd love to hear from you, and we're really looking forward to putting that up there because that same theater has a 99-seat theater and a 360-seat theater. We sold out the 99-seat theater in 48 hours and without really trying very hard, and I'd love to have more people come down and do it. So as always, I just want to close by saying what I always do. Thank you so much for your support. If you're a BillWhittle.com member, it's been a pleasure this week to provide you with members-only content which you've deserved from the beginning. If you're not, I'd love to have you be, and if you can't, I certainly understand that too. But in any event, as always, thanks for the support and the kindness, especially the kindness on the road. And I suppose we'll just leave it there, and we'll see you with a full basket full of stories from Speakeasy on the next Stratosphere Lounge, which hopefully will be next week, but will be pretty soon. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again for your help on Astro Girl, who does such a great job on the board. And thanks for your support and membership, and we'll see you real soon.